This is the 5th Aviation Environment Summit, and we're delighted that so much of the industry has come together yet again to address the issues of aviation and environment, and particularly the challenge of climate change. Climate change right now is absolutely at the top of the political agenda, and that's the reason why so many people from the industry are here, because we are moving ahead in addressing this issue quite aggressively, and over the last few years I think we've made huge progress in how we're trying to move forward. So this is a real opportunity, a forum, 350 people from all over the world, from all sectors of industry and many government representatives, where over a day and a half we can have a really good interactive debate and try and really wrestle some of these core issues to the ground.
What's this year's big standout headline themes for you? What are the things which is really creating the loudest buzz?
The biggest buzz right now, of course, is the political agenda. 3 years ago, the industry came together and signed a declaration and a commitment to addressing climate change. Since then, we've moved forward aggressively. We've done a huge amount of analysis, looking at where we think the reduction opportunities are. Based on that, last year we put together a set of 3 very ambitious targets, and we took those targets to the climate change negotiations in Copenhagen, and we've taken those same targets to the International Civil Aviation Organization, together with a comprehensive framework of how we believe that the industry can move ahead in reaching those targets. What we need now is the political framework and the political policy framework that is going to support the industry in reaching those goals. Right now, as we are meeting here in Geneva, the ICAO Council is deliberating a draft declaration that is going to be presented to the 37th Assembly of ICAO, which is an assembly of the 190 countries that make up the International Civil Aviation Organization, in a week's time. So the timing couldn't be better for industry to get together to discuss these issues and to send some very strong messages to that forum that will be meeting in Montreal about what needs to be done from a policy perspective. So that is what is really driving people to come here to Geneva.
What are the sort of big key statements that I think we can look forward to?
I think the really interesting thing is that we've set targets, but we're not sitting around waiting for this policy framework that I've talked about to materialize. What we're doing is seeing a huge amount of collaborative action across the industry in really trying to address these challenges, whether it's the airlines, the airports, the air navigation service providers, or the manufacturers. So what you're going to be seeing over the next day and a half are a series of exciting announcements about things that not just are planned, but things that are actually being delivered. And we've already had one this morning from Eurocontrol talking about continuous descent approaches. They made a commitment to introduce that in over 100 airports. They're already up ahead of their target in terms of how they're moving forward. We're going to see announcements on the technology side, and particularly one of the key interest areas right now, of course, is sustainable alternative fuels for aviation. And I think we'll see a couple of exciting announcements on that front in terms of how the industry is coming together again to try and move that agenda forward. As an industry, we've come together last year and we set 3 ambitious targets. The first one, between now and 2020, is to continue to push fuel efficiency improvements by an average of 1.5% per annum. Now, on first sight, that may not seem a lot, but that does mean an improvement of 17% between where we are today and where we want to be in 2020. And what that means is, for example, that we'll have to deliver 12,000 new aircraft in that time frame at a cost of $1.3 trillion. We'll also have to deliver improvements in air traffic management. So, the challenge over the next 10 years is great in itself. Moving beyond 2020, we've made a commitment to what we call carbon neutral growth. So even though we anticipate that the future traffic of aviation will continue to grow, we've committed to cap our net emissions from whatever level they will be in 2020. Now again, that is a huge challenge, and it will need a massive effort in terms of technology improvement, sustainable fuels, operational efficiencies, infrastructure improvements, and possibly some forms of economic measures, including offsetting. But we've laid out a very clear plan about how we want to get there. And then looking beyond 2020 to the longer term, we've set ourselves an aspirational target of trying to reduce our net emissions by 50% compared to where they were in 2005. Now that is a huge challenge, and that will need revolutionary technologies. We're looking at things like blended wing designs, new engine technologies, and above all the potential opportunity of alternative sustainable fuels, particularly biofuels. So there's a lot to go for, and we've set ourselves some clear objectives, and that helps the industry in identifying how we need to move forward. And I think that has provided the framework that we need in order to direct our actions over the next decades. One of the biggest and most exciting opportunities facing this industry are sustainable alternative fuels. And over the last 3 years, we've turned a dream to reality. And we've done a lot of work across the industry in evaluating different opportunities in terms of alternative fuels. Biofuels represent probably the biggest opportunity that we can see right now. And we moved from concepts to doing in-flight testing of a variety of different types of fuels, and we've proven that they work, that we don't need to make changes to engines and airframes in order to use them, and most importantly that we can mix it with existing jet fuel. So as more and more of these fuels become available, they can take up an increasing percentage of the fuel supply. Naturally, when you're dealing with biofuels, there have been historically some problems in terms of things like competition with food supply and water supply. These were caused by using what we call first generation biofuels, that were using things like crops like soy and maize. For aviation, we're dealing with second generation biofuels. These are things like jatropha, camelina, that can be grown on marginal land without huge amounts of water necessary. And more excitingly, as we move forward, third and new generation biofuels based on things like algae. Now, there are a lot of challenges that we have to come up with. Firstly, it's about sustainability criteria, and we're working very closely with different actors across the world, the Roundtable on Sustainable Biofuels, for example, to really make sure we put the right sustainability criteria in place up front. We're talking about a new industry here, and we've got the opportunity to get it right from the beginning, and I think that's one of the exciting things. But the real challenge over the next 2 to 3 years is the commercialization of these fuels, and then the scalability of whether we can deliver sufficient quantities of these fuels at the right price in order to make it a viable proposition for the industry to move forward on. And that's where our focus is right now.
How satisfied are you that the government response to these targets is what you want to hear? How are you getting the support? Are you getting the responsiveness?
So the industry has spent a lot of time doing analysis and has set some fairly ambitious targets, and now we need the political framework that will support the industry in moving forward to achieve them. I think the frustration we have right now is, first of all, we find ourselves in a slightly bizarre situation of being ahead of the regulators and actually having laid out a plan. But secondly, we are also embroiled to some extent in the much broader climate change debate that's been characterized in the Copenhagen meeting at the end of last year. So aviation is a very small component of that overall political discussion. All the states that we talk to recognize the approach the industry's taken. Sorry, he's distracted.
Sorry, these guys. Excuse me. Can you just 2 minutes seulement pour deux minutes. Ça suffit. Okay, sorry, it was just that we had this. This sort of.
Can we start that again? So there's clicking going on, and I saw you. C'est pas votre problème. Okay,
so the broader, we can pick up actually, it was embroiled in the bigger climate.
So where we are with aviation, we're a small component of this much larger debate that's going on, political discussion going on around the whole issue of how to address climate change. From an aviation perspective, governments recognise the approach the industry's taken. They may not entirely agree with the targets that we've set, but they certainly agree on the direction that we've taken. And more importantly, they all agree that we need a global framework to deal with international aviation, because they recognise that international aviation is a global industry. And so the challenge that we now have is not about what we need to do, but really about how we need to do it. And there are big differences of approach between developing states and developed countries, different parts of the world, and this is where at ICAO, at the upcoming assembly, we're hoping that there will be a constructive discussion with some constructive outcome to help us put this global framework in place.
Fantastic, okay.